Thomas Samuel Kuhn was one of, if not the, most influential philosophers of the 20th century. He also wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, one of the most cited academic works of all time. Kuhn's contribution to the philosophy of science broke off from the tradition of several key positivist doctrines and introduced a new style of philosophy of science that helped it to form a stronger bond to the history of science. Although most scientists don't know much concerning the content of Kuhn's work, many know of the paradigm shift, an idea of Kuhn's creation. In 1943, he graduated from Harvard with the Latin honor summa cum laude, meaning with highest distinction. He spent the rest of World War II researching radar at Harvard and then in Europe. He gained his master's degree in physics in 1946 and his doctorate in 1949, also physics. Up until 1956, Kuhn taught a class in science there for undergraduates in the humanities as part of the general education and science curriculum developed by Harvard's president James B. Conant. Kuhn then turned to the history of astronomy and published his first book, The Copernican Revolution, in 1957. In the following years, Kuhn worked many teaching jobs at various schools, from UC Berkeley to Princeton to MIT. In 1977, a collection of Kuhn's essays on philosophy and history of science were published. The title of this collection, The Essential Tension, was taken from one of his earlier essays on the importance of the tradition of science. A year later, his second historic book on the early history of quantum mechanics, Blackbody Theory and the Quantum Discontinuity, was published. Throughout the 80s and 90s until his death, Kuhn continued to work and write on topics such as history, philosophy of science, incommensurability as a concept, evolution, and psychology. Originally written while Kuhn was a Harvard grad student and first published as a monograph in the International Encyclopedia of Unified Science, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions came to be one of the world's most cited academic texts and a required reading for many degrees. Over 1 million copies in 16 different language translations have been sold. Though written originally in the interest of philosophy, it first gained far more interest from social scientists before getting much of the larger audience it has today. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions was, to put it simply, revolutionary. This book was the first to provide a detailed account of the theoretical concept of scientific change. Rather, conceptions of the way science should develop were biased and influenced more so by the philosophy of science, as well as heroic views of scientific progress. Before Kuhn, the development of science was thought to be that new truths were to be added amidst all prior discoveries, rather than alternating phases of normal science with the newer revolutions. One of the many points in the Structure of Scientific Revolutions is perspective, more specifically the way perspective can change. Kuhn believed science to be, quote, a series of peaceful interludes punctuated by intellectually violent revolutions, described as the tradition-shattering complements to the tradition-bound activity of normal science. In this context, after one experiences such a revolution, one conceptual worldview is replaced by another. According to Kuhn, paradigms, or essential collective beliefs shared by scientists about nature's laws and how problems are to be solved, are essential to scientific inquiry. This is because, quote, no natural history can be interpreted in the absence of at least some implicit body of intertwined theoretical and methodological belief that permits selection, evaluation, and criticism, end quote. Paradigms guide all scientific research, and the presence of a paradigm is necessary for a field to be considered a scientific one. This brings us back to the topic of worldview change, for one of Kuhn's most fundamental arguments is that the developmental patterns of science are equal to the transitions from one paradigm to another by means of revolution. In addition, he claims that when this event, known as a paradigm shift, takes place, quote, a scientist's world is qualitatively transformed and quantitatively enriched by fundamental novelties of either fact or theory. After years of pondering, Kuhn realized that Galileo and Newton, when it came to the containment of the physics of motion, had created an entirely new intellectual framework, Aristotle working with a similar yet earlier version. Kuhn described this change of intellectual frameworks within which facts are interpreted as a paradigm shift. Thank you for watching.